Welcome to the Photography Opinion Podcast. We discuss all things photo, video, and camera related. I'm Ben Lucas.
And I'm Stuart Marlantis.
And this is Photo Op.
So guess what, Ben?
What? I'm excited.
We have a question.
Nice. I like it. What's the
Question from listener Doug. First of all, Doug, thanks for reaching out. His question is, how many images should be presented from a high school senior photo shoot? I have only photographed one or two family/friends that would be considered a professional shoot, but I want to get my first paid shoot this fall, so any suggestions are welcome. Love your show and like the open discussion enough to join your Patreon. I hope that helps.
Woohoo!
Yeah, that does help, Doug. Thank you so much.
It does help. Thank you so much, Doug. So for all of you out there, right now the Patreon doesn't have, special rewards and things like most other Patreons because I haven't gotten to that part yet. But we just love bringing you free content, and if you want to give a little bit of that love back, the tip jar is just $1. So if you just want to throw $1 in the tip jar, thank you so much, Doug. And we answer your questions just like this. So how many photos? Let's start with how many photos you should do from a high school senior shoot. And I will say it depends. So I would say you need to give them enough that you are giving them a good variety, because if you're not giving them a good variety, you can't get a print sale. Now, you would think the senior photo shoot, all they need is one photo from the yearbook, but if all you do is shoot that one photo from the yearbook, you're not getting anything else. So you need to shoot a variety of looks so that you can sell a variety of looks. That is more of where your money is going to come from on a senior shoot rather than the upfront fee. Senior shoots, I would almost even say, give them a huge discount on the upfront fee, or shoot for free even, because you're going to make it well worth their while on the back end if they are invested in doing a bunch of different looks and going to cool locations and doing photos. So, congrats on getting some shoots this fall. But yeah, you need to show enough that you have a good variety, but you don't want to show too much to overwhelm. Now, to put actual numbers on this, I've had photo shoots that are as little as 40 selects, and I've had some that are as many as 300 selects. But let's talk about kind of what that includes. So a select does not mean necessarily that they're just getting every single image. Maybe they do get all the images. But you're definitely not retouching and printing 300 photos. So really what it comes down to is, are you giving them finished photos? Or is this just a proof gallery that they then choose finished photos from? Because if they're buying photos, then maybe they buy 8, maybe they buy 20. Maybe they buy 40, which is awesome. Good job that they love your photos. But if you are just trying to show them proofs, I would try to show them at least 30 or 40 images that are rock solid and completely different from each other. Now, if you're having issues coming up with completely different images, let's just take one pose, one example. They're just looking square to the camera down the barrel. Well, if you shoot that vertical up close and then you zoom out, and you get a middle shot, and then you shoot a more kind of scenic landscape shot where they're kind of small, but it shows either the alley or the beach or the forest where you are. You shoot all three of those. Now you turn it horizontal, and you shoot the wide one, you shoot the middle one, you shoot the close-up one. Now you have 6 distinctly different photos, and they have not moved or changed their pose. So I'm imagining if you take that framework, you can very, very easily, at 6 distinct photos per pose, and you just start building some poses, you can very easily get to these numbers we're talking about. So most of my senior shoots are in the range of about 120 to 300 proofs, but then they end up buying, maybe they only buy one, maybe they only buy the one for the senior shoot, but most likely they'll buy more if they like your stuff. So they buy from me anywhere between 10 to 40 photos, but they're buying that 10 to 40 out of the 100 to 300 that I'm showing them.
Cool.
Stuart, any follow-ups? Did that seem like a very thorough explanation?
Yeah, makes total sense to me. But a good on you, Doug, for going for this, and I hope your page shoot this fall that you're shooting for works out. Sounds like you're going about it the right way. So congrats to you. And again, thank you for joining the Patreon. It's patreon.com/nomcreative, and there are tip jars both for this show and for Ben specifically. If you check out his YouTube channel and you want to support him directly, there is a tip jar for that
even
too.
though this podcast is also on the YouTube channel, I wanted people to differentiate what kind of content you're going for, because if we start getting a lot more subscribers and they're leaning very heavily in one tip jar than the other, then I know where I should spend more time making that high quality content that you guys love. So thank you, Doug, for the Patreon. Everyone else, go join the Patreon, patreon.com/nomcreative. And now on to today's episode. Now that we have given a good piece of advice, today's episode, what is the worst piece of advice you have ever gotten, Stuart?
There are so many. I feel like,
let's keep it to top 3. Maybe.
Yeah.
This episode could go on for a while otherwise.
So the first thing I think that I'm going to say is with worst advice is, this is granted not a specific piece of advice, but any piece of advice that is pushing a formal education. I'm certainly not against education. I've actually worked in education for most of my career thus far.
That's true.
And I make a lot of
for multiple different institutions as well.
Yeah, I've worked K-12, I've worked university. Even in my current role, I actually make a lot of educational content. That's a big part of my role. So I'm very pro getting an education of some form. That being said, as far as photo or video formal education, I hesitate to recommend that. One of to me, the end result of that is networking more than any kind of skill building.
Correct.
And really, at least in my career so far, as an education in general, the skills that I'm actually paid to use on a daily basis are pretty much skills that I didn't really build in university at all. They were pretty much stuff that I learned myself. Some of them more formal than others. Like, I have done a lot of courses and stuff on my own time that have been really helpful. But as far as my formal education, a lot of that was really only beneficial for networking reasons, and I guess fun in some respects. I mean, we met, so that's cool.
Yeah, that's true. We met in college.
So it's a social exercise.
To follow up on that, one of my favorite quotes, Mark Twain, "I never let schooling get in the way of my education." So
there's that.
I'm not saying education is bad.
It's not bad.
Don't not go to school, if that that makes sense. Did I do that right?
Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, and make sure you have realistic expectations. You're going to potentially be spending a humongous amount of money, or rather spending money that you don't have, and you're going to be in debt for years and years and years. So make sure that you're going into that with eyes wide open. If you're of that age where you're making that decision, or if you're considering going back to school.
Irresponsible.
Yeah. Be responsible with your money. Be responsible with the debt you're going to be shackled to, most likely. Just know what you're getting into and know the price that you're going to be paying as much as you can.
I am a classic example of, I went through school. I got the classic art degree. I focused in photography, and I got as many skills as I could. Now, realistically, all of the skills that I got, very few of them actually came from school. A lot of them came from online learning or in-person workshops or various internships or just kind of practicing and building and books. And there's a lot of different ways that you can learn. Literally no one has ever asked for my degree before they hire me to shoot a wedding. That has never happened. They say, can you do a good job shooting a wedding? So you're going to get a lot more mileage interning for a wedding photographer to learn the lay of the land. If that's the type of thing you want to do, then you are formal education. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but as you said, it's way more about networking and who you know than what you can do necessarily. Because if you know people in school, then they can help get you jobs, versus if you're just good and then you get kicked out into the cold on your own, you're like me and you're screwed.
I will also say, just to touch on the video or film aspect, I have literally never heard a single person tell me directly or indirectly that film school was worth the money. So if you're in that zone,
Ryan Connolly from Film Riot.
he thinks it was worth it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But it was more about because he learned how to properly be on a film set because he went specifically to film school. He learned how to do all the different jobs like gaffer and stuff that are specific to film sets. And then he had a network of connections that then could get him jobs when he graduated. So again, it was about networking.
Yeah. And I would argue you could probably talk your way into being a PA on some film and like work your way up from there. So you can learn a lot of that on the job too. But okay, so there's one person that I'm aware of that thought that film school was worth
Not that I know him personally or anything.
But yeah, I would be extra careful of film school because I have heard the worst possible things.
Yeah, it's expensive and it doesn't get you your money's worth. Okay,
there you go.
My worst top, I guess, let's say third worst, is do a 365 project. Now, if you have not heard of this before, it is shoot one photo a day, every day, for a year. Now, maybe if you just do it for the month of January, neat, cool, do that. Most people can't even get through 1 month. I did this once, and let me tell you, I was really excited for the first 2 weeks. And then I started getting bored and uninspired, and I started phoning it in. And then I did find some cool things, and I went on trips, and I made sure to take a photo every day, even if that photo didn't get posted. I eventually got around to posting most of them, I think. But yeah, by the time I hit like September, October, I'm just so burned out, and I don't want to do it anymore. And it's a strain, honestly, on kind of my time and my bandwidth.
You've only done this once. I have attempted 365 projects probably half a dozen times.
Now, one thing that I will say is shooting a calendar is almost like shooting a 12 project. So that's actually how it originally started. I wanted to do these really big, over-the-top, fantastical things where a photo shoot took multiple hours to pull off the shot, and then I would spend 10 to 20 hours in Photoshop doing a bunch of cool stuff to it, and you obviously can't do that 15 hours a day every day of the year. So that turned into, what if I just make one super cool photo a month? Well, that one super cool photo a month, I started planning these really big over-the-top projects, and scheduling wouldn't line up. And, well, okay, I missed last week's, but so it's happening, or last month's, it's happening the first week of this month. And, like, I kind of did some cool things, but, like, there was really no rhyme or reason to any of it. I was just making 12 completely random things, and I thought, well, what if they were themed somehow? And then that's kind of how I ended up starting doing the pinup calendar. But even the pinup calendar of like, I'm planning it for a lot of months, but all of the shooting really happens in like 3 months of the year. So that's not even it just, making a large commitment like that without seeing kind of a reason or a goal for it is, rough.
Yeah, I've attempted these for a variety of reasons, to either build skills or do something cool for a portfolio, or just for like notoriety if something interesting came out about it. It's never really worked out. I have tried them. I haven't tried one now in quite a few years, but there was a period of time where I was trying them regularly and it never succeeded. I would say like shoot for like, you know, like a 12 project or like a quarterly
or like
thing,
a 50
or like a 50 or just
that's
like
one
a
week
yearly
with
theme
2 vacations.
Yeah, right. Yeah, something more like that. Like be more reasonable with your time. Guaranteeing that you're going to do the same thing every day. I mean, think of it. What else do you do anything that's like outside of keeping yourself alive and healthy? What do you do literally every single day? Probably very few things. So just keep that in mind.
I mean, even like brushing my teeth is hard to do 300 like there are definitely days where I'm like, I'm too tired. I'll do it in the morning, you know? No. Forcing yourself to spend however much time it takes you to set up something new and interesting and creative. Love yourself a little bit more and don't put that burden on you.
Yeah. So one of the 365 projects that I attempted was 1 second every day, which is just a video project where you film 1 second every day and you put it together at the end of the year, which was a big trend for a while. And that leads into my next worst piece of advice, which is, again, anything related to following trends, which I realize isn't a singular piece of advice, but I have heard this many times. Do this thing, do that thing, shoot with this, shoot with that, do this style, do that style. This is really popular right now, so you should do this and you'll blow up. Pretty much, that is pretty much never, like, I stupidly have tried following trends occasionally. It's never really worked out. The things that have actually blown up for me weren't really trends at the time. They were just because I have strange interests and I would go off and be experimenting with some random thing and somebody noticed. Like, that's the only time that's ever really worked out. Like, I was early with the drone stuff and some of that blew up, but it was before it was really a trend or that you could even really, buy a drone off the shelf that was good. So yeah, following trends has never really worked for me. Be your own person, in my opinion. And yeah, some people blow up from following trends, but I think that's the exception rather than the rule. And usually they're already famous for something. So any advice that I've ever heard about following trends has been useless in my experience.
Very true. There's one trend that I'm trying to think of. The Brenzier method. You take a telephoto lens and you shoot a subject in a panoramic so it looks like a medium format, shallow depth of field, wide angle look. The reason why it's called that is because one dude started the trend. Now, how many people are famous for that? Ryan Brenzier. That's it. No one else. So I would say don't follow trend. Like, find new things and make trends.
Yeah.
Caveat. When you are starting out, copy, follow trend, do the thing, learn the technique so you can have it in your back pocket for when you need it. But following the trend is not going to be your call to success. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a good way to learn.
Yeah. I should hesitate. That's a good point. And say that copying and trying new things can be a great way to learn it, and I have done that many times. And so if you're following trends to learn a new technique, really to just kind of learn anything in general, that's fine. But following trends to be successful, to get famous, to be notable, probably not going to happen. Yeah, it's better to do your own thing and be good at what you want to do, and go from there.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Second worst piece of advice that I ever got. Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. No, they won't. No, if you set up a business and you get good and you just expect people to flock to you, that is never going to happen. And this actually kind of goes back to your just like, oh, go to school and you'll be fine. Yeah, go to school and major in business. Don't go to school and major in photography. No, it's going to be a lot of work, a lot of hustle. If you set up a website or a Facebook page and just expect people to come to you, that's not going to happen. I think when people start a business, they focus on all of the wrong things. Mm-hmm. So Doug, our intro question peep here, he says, hey, I have a couple of shoots and I'm trying to get some shoots. I think that is the right way to go about getting business. Get people to give you money. If Doug's like, all right, I bought a domain name and I built a portfolio and I hired a graphic designer and I got a logo and I am a professional now, give me money. Dude, No one cares about any of that.
That's just expected, like, at this point. Yeah, just because you're there doesn't mean you're worth giving money to, unfortunately.
Well, no, not even that. You don't need any of that
Well, true.
stuff.
Mhm.
There is a
But
like
it is expected.
okay, there is a kind of like minimum requirement of like you can take a good photo, welcome to the table, you're allowed to play now. But yeah, like people focus on all of the wrong things in business. I saw this really great video essay about this game designer on how to make a video game. And he was saying, like, I came up with this cool idea and I started sketching all of the art and making like menus and themes and sprites and did some animations and stuff. And what I failed to realize is when I actually prototyped the game wasn't fun. So I scrapped the whole thing because it made no sense and it wasn't interesting to play. I think it's kind of like that, where people focus on all of the wrong things, where if you're trying to do this as a business, the most important thing is getting clients and having a business, not setting up your paperwork and, getting your website of like, yeah, all those things are important eventually.
Yeah,
But
I think that's a great analogy, like gameplay versus gameplay versus graphics. Like this is why Nintendo is a humongous success, even though they don't have the best looking games, they don't have the most powerful hardware. Like Nintendo started as a toy company. They're over 100 years old at this point. They're still, I think, philosophically a toy company. They look at games as toys, and that the game should be fun to play with regardless of what is actually happening or what you're seeing. That it should be fun as a microcosm at every step of the way. Like it should always be fun no matter what you're doing in any process of the gameplay. And that, very much like a toy. And so as a result, they continue to make really fun games that are fun to play, and people continue to buy them despite their many issues as both a company and as a game developer. And you've got other companies that make some beautiful, gorgeous, amazing, super advanced thing, and it falls flat on its face because it's not fun to play. They kind of forgot the whole point of why you're playing games in the first place. Yeah, and people will say, oh, well, games can have other reasons. Walking simulators can be more about experiential or more about a narrative than about gameplay. Yeah, I understand. There are some exceptions to the rule, but in general, you want something to be fun first and pretty second. You there?
You're back. Yeah.
Oh, I was still recording, so I guess that worked on my end, but
okay, but I don't know what you said, and it'll be an awkward transition.
I basically said that
I can cut wherever it makes sense for me to cut, but start again with they're still philosophically a toy company. That was the sentence that you almost finished before you cut out.
So I was saying they're still philosophically a toy company, and that they approach games in that way. They approach software as toys, and that they want it to be fun to play no matter what you're seeing, no matter what you're doing in the game. It should always be fun, much like a toy. And there are a lot of developers that make something beautiful and cool to look at, but that ultimately it's not fun. And although there are some exceptions, like some people would argue that walking simulators aren't fun moment to moment, but they tell a narrative and that's compelling, that there are reasons to play games beyond the moment to moment gameplay. In general, they focus on fun over pretty, and that has served them really well. And so that is pretty much where I left off. Go.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It pretty much sums it up. There's kind of the hierarchy, and at the base of the hierarchy is actually being good at the thing you do. Get good at photography. If you're not good, don't come to the table. But then the next thing is, okay, trying to run a business, then get people to pay you money. Everything else happens after that. Yeah, otherwise you're just doing it complete wrong way, and like you're gonna end up with a lot of overhead that you can't pay for because you don't have any clients.
Perfect. I guess my last piece of bad advice.
The absolute worst piece of advice Stuart has ever gotten. Go.
A again, I'm doing these categorically. I know I'm kind of breaking the rules every time, but you are or are not a real photographer or videographer if you insert thing here. Anytime somebody has said this to me, which has actually been said to me many times, believe it or not, it has been wrong. You are what you make of yourself, I feel like, in the photo or video sphere. And no one can really tell you if you're real or not, and you're not real or not depending on what you're shooting on or how famous you are or what your images look like. If you want to and consider yourself a real photographer, videographer, then you are one. And don't let basically anybody break you down or make you feel like you're one thing or another. Actually, one of the things that I struggle with is this, you telling you yourself this, and we've talked about this before, imposter syndrome. This is something that, although I have heard from other people, I've heard probably from myself most of all, and that's like, oh, you're not good enough. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. You're not skilled enough. Your images aren't good enough. Your videos aren't cut together snappily enough. They don't tell a good enough story. You'll say these things to yourself, maybe not super consciously, but you will say these things to yourself, and that's a sign, as we've said, of something that you're doing right. That your tastes are evolving with your skills and you're constantly pushing yourself to be better. But in the same breath, don't let that beat you down and make you feel dejected and that you're not good enough. If you're doing good work and especially, people are paying you for that work, as we've talked about running a successful business, then you're real. You're a real photographer. You're a real videographer.
Even if
that's
people
all that matters.
aren't paying you.
Yeah, even if people aren't paying you, right? If you're doing good work that you're proud of, or at least can tolerate for a few minutes before you move on to the next thing, then you're real.
So I'm sure this quote gets misattributed all the time, but the most recent thing I saw it attributed to Mozart of amateur, it means for the love of. Mm-hmm. So it is, you are doing something because you love it. It doesn't mean that you have to be good at it even necessarily. Of like, what is it? The my singing voice is reserved for myself in the shower and the child's lullaby. Of like, you know what? You sing because you love it, and that's fine. You take photos because you love it, and that's fine. Don't let anyone tell you different, even if you're not doing it full time, even if you're not making a dime off of it. You're a photographer if you want to be a photographer and you take photos. That's unless you shoot Nikon, then get out of here. I'm kidding.
I shot Nikon for years.
I'm kidding.
As Morpheus said, what is real? This isn't even a question that you or anybody else should be asking. If you do it, you are.
Yeah, so kind of in line with my Field of Dreams thing, still same but different. Worst piece of advice I've ever gotten is having X means you'll succeed or make more money. That is not true. If you buy that new camera, are you currently losing a lot of clients because they look at your camera and go, oh, that's not a high enough quality? If so, sure, maybe you need a new camera, but otherwise you're just doing it because you want it. Are you legitimately losing out because you don't have a studio space? I haven't had a studio space for years. I go to people's houses or conference room or parks. Does not having X actually matter? And does buying X actually mean that you'll get new stuff? Did I buy a probe lens? Absolutely freaking did. Probe lens is fantastic. Has it brought in a single paying client purely because I own the thing? No, it has not. Have I used it on client jobs? Yeah, sure. But buying the thing did not correlate to the kind of return that you would expect. Very, very rarely is having a thing, whether it is a studio space or a new piece of camera gear, actually going to bring in money and return like you think it will. Probably not.
Yep, probably not. Yeah. This is I mean, gear acquisition syndrome is something that I have struggled with forever. And
Part
I
of it
still
comes
struggle
down to
with.
gear acquisition syndrome, but I think the other part too is there are bigger things of like, oh,
Yeah.
if only I had an assistant, or if only I had a studio, or if only I'm able to, buy an ad in a wedding magazine. I've bought so many ads in wedding magazines and they never work. Like maybe they'll work in your area, but no, it is.
And I feel like some of this mentality is delaying, right? Like you're mentally giving yourself reasons to not do something, to not like improve your craft, to not go out and sell yourself, so to speak. You're giving yourselves a lot of reasons, like, oh, well, I can't do this until I have this. I can't do this until I get this thing. I can't do this until I have that camera. When really you probably can, and that's probably just an excuse not to do it. And you're just putting up barriers for yourself that don't need to be there. I understand, like, especially when I want to do personal projects and pursue stuff, like when I'm tired at the end of the day, I want to be like, well, I don't really want to do that project because if only I had this piece of gear, the project would be way better. And it's always one of those things where I regret not doing that at the end of the day, that I totally could have done it and I was just giving myself excuses. And I feel like this can dovetail into that quite a bit. So having X means you can get more clients. Probably not.
Have I bought things with the intent of getting more clients from them? Yes, I have. 2 of those items I'm still waiting to return because COVID, but the vast majority of the other things, probably not. I've actually bought most of my stuff of a client comes to me and says, I want to pay you a lot of money to do this thing. And then I say, great, pay me money. And then I go, oh shoot, I can't do the thing. And then I buy whatever I need to be able to do the thing. That is when I buy stuff. I don't buy stuff and go, come to me, I own the thing. Except ProBlends. Come to me. I've got a ProBlends. It'll make your stuff look fabulous.
Yeah.
Hashtag not sponsored.
There are exceptions. There are shots that you can only get with a ProBlends. But yeah, in general, having the thing will not mean that people flock to you. I mean, like, does that... Boy, like, I'm trying to think of any, have I ever gone to somebody just because they had the thing to pay them money? Like, probably not. Like, it was probably like a skill. And I just assumed if they needed the thing, they would either get it or already have it. I don't think I've I haven't like gone to a plumber and said, oh, you've got this wrench, so I know you're legit and I'm going to buy your services. Like, no, I assume that they have the tool that they need to do the job. And I'm buying them for their skill using the tool and not because of the tool.
And you can always rent the thing and bill it to your client project. You could own no camera equipment and still run a photography business just renting. Not that I recommend it.
That would be
but
scary.
You could.
But you could.
You could. So that is our worst pieces of advice that we've ever gotten. We hope that you enjoyed it and you similarly agree that this advice sucks. So with that in mind, carry on, keep shooting. You are a real photographer, unless you shoot Nikon. I'm kidding, obviously. Or Sony.
How dare you?
If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, you can email us at hello@photo-op.show.
Watch us on Ben's YouTube channel at Non-Creative.
As in Om Nom Nom.
Share this with a friend, and you can listen to Photo Op anywhere podcasts are sold.
Or download it. 'Cause it's free.